When Katt Williams speaks, the entire entertainment industry listens and sometimes they panic. For years, Katt has been calling out what he calls Hollywood's hidden truth, but this time, he's naming names Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley. According to Katt, what really happened behind the cameras of comedy's biggest shows wasn't just about fame, it was about control, power, and silence. He claims certain kings of comedy tried to block him from TV deals, movie roles, and big stages, all because he refused to play by their rules. Now, leaked interviews, resurfaced clips, and insider reports suggest there might be some truth behind Katt's shocking claims. Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley really tried to shut Katt Williams out of the industry. Or is this just another chapter in Hollywood's endless power game? Tonight, we break down the timeline, the receipts, and the hidden connections that reveal what really went down, from secret studio meetings to public jabs on live radio. Get ready, because once you hear what Katt said, you'll never look at Hollywood the same again. In Hollywood, laughter sells, but behind the laughter, there's a darker side that few dare to talk about. And when it comes to truth-telling in comedy, one name stands above the rest: Katt Williams. Sharp-tongued, fearless, and brutally honest, Katt Williams has built his entire career on saying what others are too scared to admit. From sold-out arenas to viral interviews, he's never backed down from calling out what he sees as hypocrisy and corruption inside the entertainment industry. But when Katt started talking about Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley, things changed. Because this time, it wasn't just jokes, it was personal. To understand what went wrong, we need to rewind back to the early 2000s, the golden era of black comedy. The kings of comedy had already made history, with legends like Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, D.L. Hughley, and the late Bernie Mac redefining what success looked like for black comedians in America. Meanwhile, Katt Williams was rising fast, raw, wild, and unpredictable, the opposite of Hollywood polish. He wasn't a safe comedian. He was a rebel with a mic, calling out the system and mocking the powerful. The audience loved him, but that kind of honesty doesn't come without enemies. By the late 2000s, whispers started spreading in Hollywood that Katt Williams had become difficult to work with. Some insiders claimed he'd been blacklisted from certain shows, while others said he was being pushed out for being too real. And that's when Katt began hinting publicly that other comedians, particularly Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley, were part of the problem. In multiple interviews, Katt didn't hold back. He accused some big-name comedians of selling out to Hollywood, trading their originality for fame, deals, and approval from industry gatekeepers. He said they wanted to become the face of the system instead of challenging it. When asked about Steve Harvey, Katt once said, "Steve's a company man. He'll do whatever it takes to stay on TV. But I'm not built like that." That one line started a storm. Fans began debating online, was Katt jealous? Or was he exposing something real? Around the same time, Katt made another shocking claim that some comedians and producers had formed quiet alliances in Hollywood, deciding who gets work and who doesn't. According to him, it wasn't about talent, it was about obedience. He said, "When you don't play their game, they make you disappear." To Katt, this wasn't paranoia, it was personal experience. He talked about being offered big movie roles on the condition that he toned down his message or stopped mentioning certain topics on stage. He refused, and not long after, projects started disappearing. Things got worse in 2018 when Katt appeared on V103 Atlanta, a radio station where Wanda Smith, a comedian and radio host, tried to clown him during an interview. What started as playful banter turned into one of the most infamous exchanges in modern comedy history. Katt snapped back with lightning speed, roasting Wanda live on air while exposing details about her personal life. The clip went viral within hours. Millions watched as he completely dominated the moment. But behind the laughs, there was something deeper. Because that same station had ties to D.L. Hughley, another comedian who had often criticized Katt's outbursts. Just days later, D.L. made comments on his own show, calling Katt self-destructive and saying he was ruining his own legacy. Katt didn't stay silent. He fired back, accusing D.L. of being a Hollywood puppet who talks about real issues only when cameras are rolling. "Don't talk to me about being real when you're getting paid to stay quiet," Katt said. That feud reignited their long-standing tension, one that dated back years. Industry insiders say the real problem wasn't just personal beef, it was power. At the time, Steve Harvey and DL Hughley both had major TV platforms. Steve had his own daytime show, endorsements, and major brand deals. DL had a syndicated radio show and frequent TV appearances. Katt, he was unpredictable, too raw, too honest, too uncontrollable for network television. So while the others became the faces of family-friendly comedy, Katt was being quietly removed from that circle. A former Bet producer even revealed anonymously, "There was a time when Katt was the hottest comic in the country, but the networks didn't want to deal with him. They wanted someone they could script." Steve fit that role. That's when Katt started connecting the dots. To him, it wasn't just a coincidence. It was controlled. In 2010 to 2012, Katt's career took a hit. Several arrests, public breakdowns, and viral incidents painted him as unstable. But if you listen to Katt's side, he claims that was the plan all along. He said, "They can't kill your voice, so they kill your image." He insisted that certain powerful names wanted to discredit him so his message wouldn't spread. The media labeled him crazy, and Hollywood stopped calling. But even then, Katt never gave up. He started doing independent tours, performing for fans directly, no corporate sponsors, no networks, no censors. And those shows are still sold out. That's when he realized the truth: the audience was with him, even if Hollywood wasn't. Meanwhile, Steve Harvey and DL Hughley continued their rise. Both were labeled as kings of comedy. Both had respect, fame, and TV power. But every time Katt mentioned their names, fans noticed they rarely clapped back directly. Steve once said in an interview, "I don't respond to foolishness." DL said, "I'm too busy working to argue with conspiracy theories." But silence can be powerful, and for Katt, that silence spoke volumes. He believed it was proof that they didn't want to debate him publicly because they knew the truth might come out. So he doubled down, promising that one day he'd show the receipts. Steve Harvey and DL Hughley really tried to silence Katt Williams? Or was Katt's truth mixed with frustration from years of being misunderstood? No one can deny Katt's impact. Even his critics admit he changed the comedy game forever. But the more he spoke out, the more Hollywood seemed to shut its doors. Was it coincidence or consequence? In part 2, we'll break down the receipts Katt Williams hinted at, including the hidden contracts, interviews, and the strange Hollywood connections that seemed to prove his claims weren't just rants, they were warnings. Because in Katt's own words, comedy's supposed to tell the truth. And if the truth makes people uncomfortable, that's not my problem. After years of whispers, hints, and viral sound bites, Katt Williams finally started dropping pieces of the puzzle that shocked fans and insiders alike. He claimed there was a systematic effort to sideline him, to silence his voice, and to prevent him from getting the roles, deals, and shows he deserved. And this wasn't just conjecture. According to him, there were documents, emails, and phone calls that proved how Hollywood's inner circles operated behind closed doors. The first alleged incident came in the early 2010s, when Katt was negotiating for a major film role. He claimed that producers loved his audition, but after feedback from higher-ups, the offer was rescinded. He later revealed that this was allegedly due to influence from other comedians and executives, people who wanted to protect their own positions and maintain control over the types of comedians Hollywood promoted. He called it the comedy blacklist, and he insisted it wasn't personal to him alone, but about keeping the hierarchy intact. Katt went on to mention private conversations and meetings where he was warned to tone it down or risk losing everything. He said executives hinted that certain names had been consulted, names like Steve Harvey and DL Hughley, and that they had unofficially agreed that Katt's outspoken style was bad for business. The comedian stressed repeatedly that this wasn't about jealousy. It was about maintaining influence and keeping control of what audiences were allowed to see. Fans and critics alike started digging into old clips, interviews, and social media posts to cross-check Katt's statements. One viral tweet resurfaced, where a fan compared Katt's trajectory to Harvey and Hughley's, while all three started at the top of the stand-up scene. Only Katt seemed to consistently face obstacles that others didn't. Industry insiders confirmed that Katt's unpredictability and refusal to follow a strict corporate script often caused friction with network executives and sponsors. Katt also mentioned a series of radio interviews that had been edited or taken out of context to make him appear unstable. One prominent example was a morning show appearance where he had a heated exchange with the host, which later circulated online as a clip titled "Katt Williams Loses It on Air." According to him, the edits were deliberate, meant to damage his credibility and make it easier for gatekeepers to dismiss him. He said, "They turned a conversation into a narrative that suited their agenda." Leaked contracts and production memos, which Katt referenced, suggested that his career was closely monitored. Certain films, television specials, and appearances were allegedly halted after discussions in private boardrooms where it was decided that Katt was too controversial to promote. He pointed to emails showing that some producers had consulted with Harvey and Hughley about the viability of certain projects, implying that their influence indirectly determined whether he could move forward. Yet, while Katt's accusations were explosive, they weren't universally accepted. Critics argued that his legal troubles and erratic behavior had naturally affected his opportunities. But fans noted a pattern. Whenever Katt had a breakthrough, someone would intervene in subtle ways to slow his momentum. Whether intentional or systemic, the effect was the same: a barrier between him and mainstream Hollywood, beyond contracts and emails. Katt's primary receipts were people, colleagues, insiders, and other comedians willing to speak anonymously. One source claimed that during a private comedy networking event, Harvey and Hughley had discussed how to manage rebellious comics and agreed that certain performers, including Katt, needed to be controlled. These statements, if true, suggested a coordinated approach rather than random coincidence. Even the public interactions added fuel to the fire. Every time Katt made a viral comment, fans noticed Harvey or Hughley responding indirectly. Interviews where they would subtly criticize the outspoken comedian or avoid defending him altogether. Katt argued that these were signals that the system was working against him, reinforcing the idea that his voice was being intentionally muted. Despite the challenges, Katt Williams persisted. He began his independent tours, drawing massive crowds, selling out venues that mainstream Hollywood hadn't opened for him. This move not only proved his popularity, but also demonstrated that his problem wasn't talent, it was influence. His independent success, according to him, threatened the carefully maintained hierarchy that some comedians and executives had built over decades. Katt also noted that the rise of social media had allowed him to circumvent traditional channels. Platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter let him speak directly to fans without network approval. Clips of interviews, stand-up specials, and candid moments went viral, gaining millions of views and creating a groundswell of support. This direct connection, Katt argued, was a form of rebellion against the silence he was forced into. The story took another twist when insiders mentioned the role of comedy tours. While Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley were involved in corporate-backed tours, Katt often toured independently, directly competing with their audiences. Some insiders hinted that certain venues and sponsors were subtly instructed to favor Harvey and Hughley, making Katt's path more difficult. These indirect obstacles, Katt argued, were part of the larger effort to control which comedians were allowed prominence. Fans online started piecing together timelines, comparing Katt's lost opportunities to Harvey and Hughley's meteoric rises. Some concluded that Katt was telling the truth, that Hollywood had indeed created a system where certain comedians were prioritized over others. Others still argued that Katt's personality and legal troubles naturally limited his access. But even skeptics couldn't ignore the pattern of lost roles, edited interviews, and canceled specials that coincided with Katt speaking out against the industry. Ultimately, the receipts were less about financial transactions and more about influence, control, and power. Katt Williams made it clear that the battle wasn't personal animosity, but a systemic attempt to manage voices that refused to conform. He positioned himself as a truth teller, someone who wouldn't compromise his message for fame or money. In his words, "I wasn't going to trade my voice for a check." That's the real crime in their eyes. By the end of part 2, viewers were left with a clear picture. Katt Williams faced real obstacles, influenced by some of the biggest names in comedy, including Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley. Whether intentional or systemic, the effect was undeniable: a comedian with talent, courage, and vision, struggling against a machine determined to silence him. In the next part, we'll explore how Katt Williams fought back, the consequences of speaking out, and what Hollywood insiders and audiences have said since. We'll examine whether his accusations stand the test of time, and how his resilience continues to influence comedy today. After years of accusations, viral interviews, and behind-the-scenes whispers, Katt Williams' story reached a turning point. The comedian, who had once been labeled difficult or unstable, began to receive the recognition he deserved, not just from audiences, but also from insiders who finally acknowledged the challenges he faced. Part 3 explores how he fought back, the industry's response, and what his story means for comedy today. Katt's independent tours had already proven that the audience was on his side. Venues that once ignored him were now selling out within days. Social media became his platform, allowing him to connect directly with fans and bypass traditional networks. Clips of his stand-up specials, interviews, and candid moments circulated widely, showing that his popularity wasn't a fluke. Fans shared memes, clips, and commentary supporting his claims, creating an online movement that made Hollywood take notice. Industry insiders eventually began to speak out, confirming that Katt's accusations weren't entirely baseless. Several producers and comedians, many choosing to remain anonymous, admitted that networks often preferred safe comedians, and that outspoken performers like Katt Williams could face subtle forms of exclusion. They also confirmed that there were private discussions involving top names in comedy, where concerns were raised about Katt's unpredictable style. These insiders emphasized that while the intent may not have been malicious, the effect was the same. Barriers that prevented him from achieving the opportunities he deserved. At the same time, Katt's public image evolved. While early media coverage focused on his erratic behavior, audiences began to see the context: a talented comedian challenging a system designed to silence him. Interviews highlighted his persistence, resilience, and ability to stay relevant despite numerous setbacks. He became a symbol of defiance, a reminder that speaking your truth in Hollywood often comes at a cost, but it also builds a loyal following that no network can ignore. Steve Harvey and D.L. Hughley's responses remained measured. They rarely engaged directly with Katt's accusations, choosing instead to maintain their positions in mainstream media. Some interpreted their silence as avoidance, while others saw it as wisdom, knowing that a public feud would only amplify the narrative Katt was presenting. Regardless, the story created a lasting cultural dialogue about power, influence, and fairness in comedy. Katt also took control of his narrative by releasing new material that directly referenced his struggles. His specials included subtle jabs, clever wordplay, and pointed commentary on industry hypocrisy. Audiences loved it. They laughed, they related, and they shared. What had once been a liability, his refusal to conform, became his greatest strength. It positioned him not just as a comedian, but as a cultural commentator, unafraid to speak uncomfortable truths. Social media, podcasts, and YouTube further amplified Katt's voice. Fans dissected every interview, every performance, and every viral clip. Discussions about the power dynamics in comedy spread across Twitter threads and forums. Analysts began to recognize the broader implications. Katt Williams' story wasn't just about one comedian, but about a systemic pattern of gatekeeping in entertainment. Despite the tension, there were moments of reconciliation and respect. Some comedians who were initially aligned with networks began praising Katt for his talent and resilience. They acknowledged that while his methods might have been unconventional, his contributions to comedy were undeniable. These acknowledgments, even if quiet, cemented Katt's legacy as a disruptive force, someone who forced the industry to recognize talent without compromising voice or integrity. Katt's journey also inspired a new generation of comedians. Young performers saw that authenticity, courage, and perseverance could overcome systemic challenges. They learned that the path to success in comedy doesn't always follow the traditional corporate ladder. Sometimes it requires building your own audience, standing your ground, and trusting that talent will be recognized eventually. By the late 2020s, Katt Williams had become more than a comedian. He was a case study in resilience and self-determination. Interviews, documentaries, and viral clips revisiting his conflicts with Steve Harvey and Hughley highlighted the lessons. Speaking truth to power may be risky, but it can also be transformative. His story is now a blueprint for navigating Hollywood while staying authentic. Moreover, Katt's fans and industry commentators continue to debate the ethics, intentions, and consequences of the power dynamics he exposed. Was it deliberate suppression or systemic preference for safe entertainers? Steve Harvey and Hughley consciously participated in silencing him, or were they simply part of a larger machine? Katt's narrative leaves room for interpretation, which keeps the conversation alive and relevant. In addition, Katt's resilience demonstrates the power of agency in an industry that often marginalizes outspoken voices. By building independent tours, leveraging social media, and controlling his public image, he bypassed traditional obstacles and reclaimed his story. He proved that even when the system seems stacked against you, persistence and direct engagement with your audience can create opportunities where none existed. Ultimately, the saga of Katt Williams versus the comedy establishment is a lesson in courage, perseverance, and authenticity. Katt showed that staying true to your voice, even in the face of powerful opposition, can lead to both personal fulfillment and cultural impact. While the allegations, tensions, and challenges created controversy, they also highlighted the inequities and power struggles that often go unnoticed in entertainment. Today, Katt Williams is celebrated not only for his comedy but for his unwavering commitment to authenticity. His experiences with Hollywood's gatekeepers, including figures like Steve Harvey and Hughley, has become a touchstone for conversations about fairness, influence, and integrity in the entertainment industry. Fans, comedians, and analysts alike recognize that his story is about more than just fame or conflict. It's about the courage to speak truth, challenge norms, and redefine what it means to succeed on your own terms. As we look back on the journey, one thing is clear: Katt Williams transformed adversity into opportunity. He turned obstacles into platforms, criticism into dialogue, and silence into a voice that cannot be ignored. And while debates about the specifics of his claims will continue, his legacy as a fearless, disruptive, and brilliantly talented comedian is firmly established. In the end, Katt Williams teaches us that speaking out, even when it risks everything, can leave a lasting mark not just on audiences, but on the entire industry. The saga isn't just about accusations or feuds. It's about resilience, influence, and the undeniable power of a voice unwilling to be silenced.